Early on August 2nd, 1946, a startling announcement went on air describing a conflict between two opposing sides.
The people are running, some are yelling, and we don't know what the activity is, but there has been sporadic firing up in the left.
In southeast Tennessee, 1946, the Battle of Athens introduced a new form of county government when a conflict erupted between a local political machine and the ex-GIs who tried to stop it. The battle and the events surrounding it gave hope to a people who were in desperate need of a major change.
Politics has always been a strong motivator for people in McMinn County. The political differences there date back to the Civil War. So when America entered World War II, over 10% of McMinn County's population went to fight. During this time, the South was dominated by political machines, and not all laws were enforced. For example, in McMinn, county officials took cuts from gambling houses, practiced fee grabbing, and voted illegally.
While overseas, many soldiers received letters from home. One said,
"I don't mean to worry you, but we had a little trouble last week."
It went on to describe a run-in with the deputy.
Some GIs returned in 1946 unaware of these actions. However, they were soon made aware of the chicanery. Because it was well known that most GIs had extra money, they were targeted by deputies. The infuriated GIs felt their way of life was threatened. They had returned from fighting against dictators, and they wanted to prevent totalitarianism in their own town.
In previous McMinn County elections, many local residents had given up on voting because the local political machine always swayed it in their favor. As a response, the GIs created a nonpartisan ticket. Instead of running a party ticket, the Republicans supported the GIs. The GIs' leading slogan,
"Your vote will be counted as cast,"
gave people hope that their voices would be heard. The Democrats countered with their own ads and speeches. Tensions were high, leading to Election Day, August 1st.
The citizens eagerly arrived near precincts by 7:30 a.m. Sheriff Pat Mansfield brought in hundreds of recently deputized men to watch the town, while the GIs also received support from neighboring counties. All day, the GI poll watchers witnessed illicit happenings. One of the first major conflicts occurred at about 3 p.m. in the Waterworks precinct, when a very prominent African-American man, Tom Gillespie, entered to vote. The deputy on duty told him he couldn't, while shouting racial slurs, but Gillespie persisted, so the deputy shot him in the lower side. Although Gillespie survived, rumors got around that he had died. One GI, Harold Powers, described the pressure by saying,
"Standing there, you could feel the tension in the air. If it's possible to feel hate, I think I felt hate."
That wasn't the only problem the Waterworks encountered. The precinct's GI poll watchers were being held hostage as a way to prevent them from watching the vote tabulations. The citizens outside wanted a compromise, the ballots for their GIs, but the Democrats did not comply.
When there was a momentary distraction, GIs Scott and Vestal broke through a window to escape. This resulted in the polls being closed early. The officers stole the ballot boxes and transported them to the jail.
At the Dixie Cafe, a deputy allowed a teenager to vote. In response, Bob Harrell, a GI poll watcher, stated,
"She can't vote, she's a kid and we all know it."
He was then attacked by a deputy.
Enraged, several GIs began to devise a plan to eliminate the duplicity. 2 GIs went to the armory and removed all the weapons. They distributed them to the GIs in the crowds, who positioned themselves on a hill across from the jail.
He said, "Son, I want you to do me a favor. Go down and be sure there's not any deputies in those." Well, I got up to go and 2 of my friends. So we go down, we slip around behind the cars and look, we're very careful. Nobody's in the cars. We start back. We made a classic mistake, almost a fatal mistake. We got to the last car, and it was about as far from where the last car was to where we could get behind some wall there. So we thought we were free, nothing's gonna happen. So when we got to that last car, we just stood up, casually started walking. Well, somebody opened up from the jail. I got 9 buckshot in that left side of my face.
The GIs returned fire. This was the advent of a 6-hour-long shootout, although only about 45 minutes were stayed. One deputy reacted by saying,
"We were very lucky, because them bullets were coming in thick and fast."
Around 2 a.m., Meigs County GIs imploded the front of the jail with dynamite. The deputies inside surrendered. As one was being led away, his throat was cut by an angry citizen, but he survived. In the hours after the battle, a mob assembled and vandalism erupted in the streets.
How any people could have changed from lifelong friends within a few hours into a bloodthirsty mob yelling for our lives is something I will never understand if I live 1,000 years,
said Sheriff Mansfield.
At about 4 a.m., the guns, cleaned, were returned to the armory. Despite newspaper reports, no one was killed in this conflict, but many were injured. One GI stated,
"It was an unlawful act that turned out right, but it's not something I'd recommend if it ever happened again."
For 3 days, McMinn County ran independently from state and country. Sheriff Mansfield resigned and an interim commission was elected.
After it was over with, one of the great things that came out of it was the Good Government League, that the men that were involved in the GI Party came together and realized that there was a problem with the way the sheriff did business, the way that local government operated, some of the state laws. And so they came up with a new form of local government in Tennessee, where we had our local government was the county court system that was made up of justices of the peace that were elected throughout the county, and then out of that group of men, they elected a county judge, and he was like the administrator of the county. But the problem was, it was every form of government balled up into one. It was your executive, your judicial, and your legislative branch of local government, but it was all in one body. And so that was fine when Tennessee was still a frontier state, but as commerce and time had passed, it became out of date. And so after the Battle of Athens, they came up with this new county council and county administrator form of government, which is what we have today in our county commissions and county executive or county mayor form of government.
After the ballots were officially counted, GI Knox Henry was sworn in as sheriff, and the other GI candidates were also sworn in. These men, among others, set up the Good Government League, or GGL. They began creating a new way to run county government by studying the systems around them. League member Harry Johnson Jr. stated,
"The first purpose of good government was to get an honest count in the August 1st election. That might be termed the first milestone, because we've done that. We hope to set up an organization that 25 years from now will be demanding the same good government practices."
The changes made by this new council-manager form of government were listed in the Private Acts, which were signed by Governor McCord on February 24, 1947.
As a result, local machine politics were stopped, and the method was studied throughout the nation by other counties wanting revision. The GGL and the new form of government were adopted by many other areas, and by 1950, it was effective in almost 800 cities and counties. News of the battle spread from coast to coast. This event even got the attention of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who wrote about it in her nationally syndicated column, describing it as a warning to governments across the country. She said,
"When the majority of people know what they want, they will obtain it."
In later elections, the GGL's nonpartisan ticket was widely supported, but after 6 years, the GGL ended. While the league was in place, it succeeded in connecting farmers to the town through road expansion, strengthening McMinn's economy by changing the way county funds were handled, and improving factories. Even though the council-manager form of government was contested in court, it continued for another 30 years. It was later slightly changed and replaced by a county executive, county commission government, which is still used in McMinn and other areas across the country today.
And so even though they had this mammoth kind of battle, within a couple of weeks, they had established a fully functioning government. People were back on the same page with each other, and with a few exceptions, and of course there will always be exceptions, they put the community going forward over the conflict that they had had. Now, to me, that's the lesson of the Battle of Athens, and it's a lesson that would be very, very important for our culture today, where there's so much polarization in politics.
Even though the official league was short-lived, it did its job of reforming local government by focusing more on the citizens and keeping them informed. It restored the county's faith in the voting system. Perhaps most importantly, the effects of this conflict ultimately gave people hope that things had changed for the better.